I think my gift is talking to people one-on-one. And as you probably know, I'm involved heavily at First Colony with the Celebrate Recovery Ministry.
Mhm.
And if I had my druthers of what to do, it would be in recovery ministry, because
Wow.
everybody is battling something. And we think that we have to be perfect as far as Christians is concerned. And if we tell somebody that we're struggling with alcohol or drugs or sex addiction or something like that, we think that people will look at us differently.
Mhm.
Uh, Come to find out, when I share what my struggle was, when other people do, the vast majority of the time, the people you're talking to don't laugh at you. They'll say something like, well, I'm struggling with that too.
Me too. Right.
Or I know somebody who's struggling, or can you help me? And that's happened so many times. So if I had to be a minister, it would probably be in recovery ministry.
You would be wonderful. And it's that sense of like deep calls to deep. Like when you lead with vulnerability, it creates space, I think, for other people. And the way I've observed you is you really live your life that way. I mean, you're
Mhm.
that kind of leader, you're that kind of person. And I'm just so thankful for you and for your ministry and for sharing this time with me. It's an honor.
I appreciate the invitation too. I've been watching a lot of your distinguished guests, and I've learned a lot. So I think what you're doing here is really needed, and these types of conversations are what we need today in this time, and in this portion of the life of the church.
Yeah, I agree. So tell me, let's start with just your response to the murder of Ahmaud. And the question I've been asking is, what's the first thing that you felt, thought,
Mhm.
and then did? Just your response.
Well, if you recall, there were snippets of the story coming out in the middle of the coronavirus. And I remember I was watching TV and someone mentioned that, and I said, what? Huh? And so I got online and started looking for some more information and found a little bit of information. And my first reaction, first of all, was not a reaction of surprise, because this has happened so many times, but it was a reaction of, here we go again,
Yeah.
over and over again. So I was sad, but I just needed some more information.
Mhm.
And then when it all started to come out several weeks ago, I called some friends and I talked about it, and it just seemed as though nothing is changing. It seems as though attitudes are not changing. And it seems also that those people who have negative attitudes when events like this happen keep those attitudes. And unfortunately, a lot of those people who have those negative attitudes are Christians.
Mhm.
And so what I try to do, and I think you've seen some of my posts on social media, I try to be the person that injects a different viewpoint
Mhm.
as tactfully and speaking the truth in love as much as I can. So I consider myself an informer in terms of perhaps telling you something that you don't know about why I and African Americans, particularly African American Christians, why we react the way that we do. And so it was a reaction of not shock, not surprise, but here we go again. I need more information. And I think now more than ever, I feel more called to talk to people, particularly white people, about what's going on and why we feel the way that we do, we being African Americans, particularly African American Christians, because we want to share this, but then when we talk to people about it, it's like there's indifference and I'm seeing things the wrong way, or maybe you should look at it this way, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk about, from your perspective as someone who's been a producer and behind the scenes, for like news outlets, do you have any best practices for those of us who consume news and consume media? You know what I'm asking?
I sure do. That's an interesting question. The first thing that I always tell people is don't ever get your news from one source.
Okay.
Use a multiplicity of sources.
Yeah.
For example, I watch TV news from time to time, but I'll get my news from several sources like NPR, ProPublica. I love the BBC.
Okay.
And the reason why, it's always good to see how other people across the pond view you.
Yeah.
So I would say, don't get your news from one source. and don't get your news from one type of source. What that is if you're watching only all conservative media, if you're watching only conservative TV and only reading conservative blogs and only listening to conservative radio, what kind of a view do you think you're going to have?
If you have Fox News playing all day, every day, not a
Yeah,
good thing.
exactly. Conversely, also, if you're only watching MSNBC,
Sure.
if you're only watching the so-called liberal media, then
Sure.
you're only going to have one view on that side.
Yeah.
I think we need to be watching both.
Mhm.
Also, I would say if you are watching media and it is extremely one-sided,
Yeah.
and you don't get at least a taste of another viewpoint, then perhaps you need to broaden your perspective. The other thing I also say is never ever get your news from social media.
Mhm.
Never ever get your news from social media, simply because anybody and everybody can call themselves a journalist and post whatever they want.
Yeah.
And what is happening now on social media is people are posting a lot of slanted things that are just mean-spirited. But if you believe that, you're gonna forward it to your friends.
Mhm.
So if we want some news that I think will tell more clearly both sides of the story, and news that I think will be more balanced, use multiple sources and stay away from social media.
That's good. That's so helpful. How do you think news outlets are shaping the conversation about, well, Ahmaud, but then race and racial justice in this country, period?
I think again, it depends on who you're watching. When I watch the African American media, it's a foregone conclusion that this was a murder, that the accused were free for almost 3 months, and there was no reason why they should be free for 3 months. If you look at other media, it's the exact opposite. I think that and I hate to divide media up like this, but in the world that we have now, it's just the way it's covered. It seems like in the conservative media, it's being overblown. It was probably the victim's fault because he didn't do as he was told. But if you look at the liberal media, it's the exact opposite. So that's another reason why I say be careful about the media, that the media, first of all, doesn't shape your thinking, and that you can think for yourself. And whenever I hear somebody espousing something that just is not factual, I tell them, well, I can hear the talking points from Fox News or from MSNBC in what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So the news it's hard to find news that gives you both sides, but it is out there. Like I said, I think NPR does a pretty good job. I think ProPublica does a pretty good job too. And there's some other media outlets that do well. Plus, I want to put in a plug for local media, local newspapers, local TV stations.
Yeah.
I think in many ways during the coronavirus and what's happening, they've stepped up to the plate. And also when it comes to this particular event that we're talking to, they provide a local coverage, a local spin on what's happening that I think we need to see. How are people reacting to Ahmaud's murder? How are the people here in the Houston area reacting to it? Well, you see that on TV a lot and you hear it on radio. So I think that's important too.
Yeah. So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, and
Okay.
I want your response to the facts of the case with Ahmaud. Like,
Okay.
would you say this was a hate crime?
Yes.
Okay.
But I would say this: the video.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's some people who like watching the video over and over and over again. That was a horrific video. I watched it 3 times, and that's all I care to watch. But I think that what needs to happen is that, justice needs to be served. One thing that I see happening in the media is that, particularly in conservative media, is the whole part of this story where he was targeted, he was profiled, and they followed him, sort of like a modern day posse. And then they hunted him down. that seems to be left out of the story. And what seems to be focused on is that he grabbed the gun and he, in essence, was fighting for his life. I don't know how I would react when I get in a situation like that. I don't know if I'd grab the gun, if I would stay there or whatever. But the fact that he was even put in that position, I think is very, very important. And I hope when it goes to trial, the fact that he was targeted and hunted down is not minimized, but it'll be maximized, because that is a crime. That is a murder. That is a shooting that absolutely did not have to happen.
Do you have hope that they will be prosecuted appropriately?
I always have hope. I am very, very optimistic as far as life is concerned. Now, as far as our judicial system is concerned, not so much so. So I'm hoping and praying that the prosecutor will do, I believe it's her job, and present all the evidence. And I hope the citizens will make their voices known. I know I know we say that we're looking for an impartial juries and impartial people to make sure that justice is served. But I still think that the people have a voice in this, to voice how they feel. And let's face it, I think the perpetrators would not be put in jail had it not been for the reaction after the video came out.
Yeah, that's the sickest part to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's super helpful.